So, welcome back. Dr. Robert J. Lifton's 8 criteria for thought reform is what we're sort of going to go over the 8 main points as it relates to the Gateway Christian Community Church that Karla was in. Um, the first one is milieu control. So, that is basically using whether it's language or certain ways of doing things that these groups will sort of you have to do it this way, whether it's how you walk, talk, dress, speak. That is milieu control. So it's if you come into a group and there's certain things that people give you like a weird look or the cold shoulder if you do things a different way from the way the group is doing it, that could be a red flag for a high control group. So, in your experience, Karla, what sort of milieu control did the group that you were in use? Language? Was it just how they did their meetings? What would you consider to be milieu control within that context?
Definitely like what we what was known as Christianese, which wasn't just at that particular church, but was like evangelical Christianity in general. And
Mm-hmm.
so it would make you feel like you're an insider because you knew this lingo that other people outside of evangelical Christianity didn't know. Um,
What's an
and
example of a terminology that that like somebody within your church would know, but nobody else would know?
So I don't know if there were any like specifically just within my church, but within evangelical Christianity in
Right.
general. And so like being slain in the spirit is something that people outside of evangelical Christianity would probably have no idea about.
Do you care to
Um,
elaborate on what that means for people that don't know?
yeah, so in evangelical Christianity, and especially it was really big. Because I've been out of evangelical Christianity for so long, like I don't know exactly how big it still is, but especially in the 90s, there it you would go up front to be prayed for by pastors, elders, and others who were specifically trained in it. And they would put their hand gently on you and then would be praying for you, often in tongues, but also in English. And they would have catchers behind you, people who were there to catch, because what would happen is you would fall back and it was the Holy Spirit, supposedly, that was like knocking you over so that you could be on the ground and God could minister to you sometimes for an hour. Um, and you just have that time with God. And it was kind of expected that if you went up and got prayed that you would be slain in the spirit. And if you weren't, it was like you weren't as spiritual or you weren't opening up as much to God or whatever. So it was just something where in order to belong, you kind of had to do it. And you were also like made to believe that is what was actually happening, that the Holy Spirit was actually knocking you over. But
Mm-hmm.
it's this whole group of like literally hundreds of people in the church all doing the same thing and being told that this is why. And so yeah, there's the power of suggestion. And I don't think it was even in all evangelical churches that that was happening, but it was definitely really big at the one that I was at Gateway. Being slain in the spirit, like specifically, is being knocked over by
Oh,
the
okay.
spirit. So be, we also had the same similar experience that you had where you were supposed to get the gift of speaking in tongues and be, yes, seen as more spiritual and godly. But that was a separate thing from being slain in the spirit, is specifically being knocked over by the
Okay.
spirit.
Now it's really interesting because for me, I sort of have also studied art, and a lot of the art that I do is sort of like an automatic writing type of thing. So I'll do like symbols and a
Hmm.
lot of a I think there's a term for it called asemic writing or whatever. Or some people call
Hmm.
it light language. There's a lot of terms for it, but it's something that I just do and I really like. And I wonder if that is sort of I wonder if it could be related to that experience as a kid, because it's sort of something that could be along the same lines.
Hmm. So automatic writing is also very big in the paranormal world
Right.
where a spirit will, you know, uh speak through you through the automatic writing, and you're just writing down. You're not thinking about what you're writing down, you're just writing down what they tell you. So yeah, it's also something in that world.
True. Yeah. And I wonder, and for me, I just sort of think about it as I'm studying just like movement, line markings. So
Hmm.
I'm thinking about it as like a
Hmm.
an artistic expression, but yeah, it
Hmm.
does tie into that world of channeling and
Hmm.
all of that stuff. So it's just really interesting to contemplate. Um, anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. So, yeah, I guess were there any other examples you wanted to sort of go over with the milieu control?
So um like in terms of dress, you were just supposed to dress modestly, especially if you were assigned female at birth. And but yeah, I wouldn't say that there was I think that there are other things that might fall into might fall into more than one category and might partly
Definitely.
fall into media control, but I think that probably falls better into one of the others.
Okay. Yeah. No, the dress thing is huge. And it does relate to milieu control, but it's probably also comes in on a lot of these criteria because it's one of the ways that milieu control is sort of described as an attempt to manage an individual's inner communication. So that's literally thought control.
Mhm.
Um, so when you're getting dressed in the morning, that sort of,
Hmm.
internal dialogue that you have. Oh, what is the weather? What do I feel like? What colors do I like? Maybe, what is this texture or that? Like it's a lot of stuff that's just internal and personal.
Hmm.
But when you are
Hmm.
controlled, when there's certain criteria that you have to follow to conform to the milieu of the group, you have to consider those things. So it is
Yeah.
literally controlling your inner dialogue or, like thought police in terms of 1984.
Yeah. Well, and in terms of like those assigned female at birth supposed to be dressing modestly, is because you're not supposed to be the cause of sin or sinful thoughts of those assigned male at birth. So it's all put on the female or those who are seen as female.
Yeah, it's so repugnant, um, to say the least.
Hmm.
But yeah, so if you're in a group or getting into a group or you've been in a group for a long time, think about are there things that you have to conform to or, ways that you think now that you didn't before when you weren't in the group? Are you able to be yourself or are you constantly having to check yourself to make sure you conform to these often unwritten rules that are meant to control you and everyone else that's in the group in terms of the human communication within an environment. So the human communication is your artifacts of dress, the way that you communicate, things that you're allowed to do without asking for permission, all that kind of stuff. What you're allowed
So
to. sorry, go ahead.
No, no, you can finish.
Oh yeah, like what you're allowed to read, what you're allowed to view.
Mm,
Um, yeah, all those things.
yeah, that's something else is like you weren't supposed to uh, look at or listen to media that was not specifically Christian. And because you're supposed to have concentrate on that which is good and pure. And then also to do with the thought police, and this might fall better into another of the categories, I'm not sure, is that Gateway also has its own school. And so they would be brainwashing these children who are born into it, most of them, from the time that it went kindergarten through grade 12. So
Hmm.
they would be in it um, their entire lives until they graduate high school. And so that definitely was to do with thought control.
Absolutely. Yeah. Um, it's a sense of Robert Lifton calls it a sense of antagonism with the outside world and us against them mentality. So that's what the milieu
Mhm.
control is. That's the goal of the milieu control is to sort of set up that like, well, we're pure and they're, not.
Mhm.
Like in Homestead Heritage, we didn't have TVs or anything like that. So we had and we didn't read newspapers or even know anything that was going on. So the
Mhm.
elders would read the news maybe like once a week and then let the congregation know of anything that they thought we should know about. So like I didn't know about 9/11
Mhm.
until like 2 weeks later, which is
Oh, wow.
crazy.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. So, um, when you were talking about the us versus them mentality, um, definitely like those who were considered backslidden Christians, those who were Christian and had left Christianity or left evangelical Christianity, you were only supposed to associate with them in order to try to coerce them back. And
Mm,
then if that wasn't working, you weren't supposed to continue on with them because they might lead you astray. And then also, we were supposed to be in the world, but not of the world. And so we were supposed to not have friends who were not Christian, not born again Christian. Except for the purposes of trying to convert them. And if you can't convert them, then don't get too emotionally attached to them or involved with them, like a friend, a deep friendship or anything.
it's
Again,
so
because they could lead you
emotionally
astray. So it's like
manipulative.
very much, yeah, yeah. And if your friends were in Gateway Church specifically, even better.
Right, because that really keeps everything under that conf umbrella, so to speak, of control. Um, so the next criteria, moving on,
Yeah.
is
Can I just say one other thing about control
absolutely.
that it reminded me of? So when if you were like a young adult when you joined, you were as soon as you got there, like within a couple of weeks, assigned spiritual parents within the congregation. And so it doesn't matter even if your parents are Christian, they you were specifically assigned spiritual parents in the congregation so that they could start the mind control immediately.
Wow. That is something that is so insidious and I've never heard of that in any other groups. But so yeah, essentially grooming people for this milieu control
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
because they knew that young people are more vulnerable. So
Yes.
yeah.
Hmm.
Scary.
Yeah.
Really is. So was there
Mm.
anything else you wanted to say about that before we moved on?
No, no, I don't think so. It's just like as you're talking about more stuff, then it just like brought up more things that I remembered that kind of fall in that category.
Oh
So
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
but I think yeah.
So for the next one called mystical manipulation, which or in parentheses planned spontaneity, um, that's sort of like making it seem like things are happening, maybe like spiritual events, sort of like the slain in the spirit thing. Like somebody, of course, had to be the first one to do that, and so the other people know what it looked like. Obviously, everyone's not getting knocked over
Mhm,
by the spirit. They saw this thing happen, and now they know that it's supposed to look like this, so they do that to fit in. Um,
mhm,
but somebody had
mhm,
to initially plan that and make it look like something was happening, um, mystically spontaneous or whatever, but it was actually planned. So this is this type of manipulation,
mhm.
psychological manipulation that these groups will do to make it seem like some spiritual thing is occurring, but it's actually they planned it. Um, do you want to talk about any examples of sort of like that you experienced within Gateway?
Yeah, so in the early to mid 90s, I'm not sure how long it went on, there was a revival called the Toronto Blessing, and it originated at the Toronto Vineyard Church. And this is where people were being, I don't think it was a brand new idea, but people were being slain in the spirit regularly. And then what was happening too is they would, like, while they're on the floor, they would just like start laughing and laughing for like an hour or whatever because God was bringing them joy. Or they even did things like they would start like barking like dogs or, but like, I mean, it was really bizarre stuff. And so because it was a revival, um, people from different evangelical churches across North America and I think some other places in the world would go to the Toronto Vineyard and then they would bring it back to their churches. So we had, I don't remember how many people, elders who went to the Toronto Vineyard and brought it back to our church. And so
Hmm.
that I think, you know, that's when this idea was planted that they would go and bring it back. Like no matter what, they would be able to bring it back. Whatever was happening there was going to be brought back. It was just a given.
Wow. That is, what that brings to mind is your example about your sister talking about, like the spirit of homosexuality being contagious. Like maybe
Hmm.
she got that idea from that sort of, uh, thing
Hmm.
where someone is able to like sort of catch a behavior or something.
Hmm. I think I know my sister spends a lot of time in conspiracy theory groups
Hmm.
and like especially online where they just like feed into one another and like one of them will say something and because one person in the group said it then they'll all believe it and stuff.
The
And
piling on. Yeah.
I think that's where she picked up the spirit of homosexual. Well, I think it was something in the Bible where she got the spirit of
Oh, I
homosexuality.
see. Okay.
Yeah, but I think like just the degree of it, and so especially like it exponentially increasing if it's a homosexual relationship, like that definitely must have come from a conspiracy theory group because that's not like that one was a brand
Right?
new one to
I've never heard that.
me.
That is so
I know.
crazy. It's just outside of the pale. Um, but yeah, this like going somewhere and then which kind of I mean, if you think about it logically, if this spiritual thing was like actually happening, then people would just get it no matter where they were. They wouldn't have to go somewhere to
Yep.
see how it was done and then I mean, that's basically
Yeah.
like a training event, right? It's like, okay, well, this is how we're doing it, and then go
Exactly.
back to your church and do
Exactly.
this. It's not,
Yeah.
it was, yeah, it's planned spontaneity. It's, of
Yeah.
course, checks this box for
Yeah.
mystical manipulation. Wow. So we are 2 out of 8 so far. Um, so we talked about this a little bit on our intro call, the demand for purity, which is the third criteria. So this is basically like, and so I know you have a lot to say about it. Um, and this is something that I think a lot of groups have, a lot of churches will have, even if they don't have a high degree of the other ones, because this is something that's, um, especially in the Western world, I think, because of how Puritanism came from Europe and then spread over the United States, and sort of, branched out other places. But so this is basically like the world is sharply divided into the pure and the impure, absolutely good and the absolutely evil. So like everything in the group is good, everything outside of the group is bad. For me in Homestead Heritage, as a small child, I remember being taught that everyone who was not in the group was going to burn in hell. And that gave me, what I think that was very traumatizing, but I didn't realize it until much later, that anytime I was out in the world, meaning just not like, going to a store or something like that, as
Mm-hmm.
a 5-year-old, 6-year-old kid, I looked around, I was just like, all these people are gonna burn in hell. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and that's like so sick when you think about it, to teach
Mm-hmm.
children that. So,
Mm-hmm.
this demand for purity, it manifests in a lot of different ways, whether it's a woman or a assigned female at birth thinking about how they should get dressed in the morning, or
Mm-hmm.
thinking about what you're allowed to order at a restaurant, or just your general world view, especially as a young person. Um, what would you want to say about that as far as your experience with Gateway and the demand for purity culture?
So, I think the first thing about purity culture is how you're not supposed to have any sexual relations with anybody
That's a
until you're
big
married
one.
to them. And yes, and so you're, it's like you're, and then once you're married, you're supposed to give yourself over to your husband, like basically whenever he wants. And so you're kind of led to fear sex, in order to keep you from doing it. And
Mm,
then so it's like be afraid of it, be afraid of it. You can't do this, you can't do this. Boom, overnight, all of a sudden you're supposed to love sex and but only with your husband. And um so it, it's a real mind fuck really because
mm-hmm.
you're yeah, overnight supposed to change your entire mindset that you've been taught like that you're supposed to do for your entire life. So like I got married at 22. So from the time I could remember up until 22, like all this time, I remember when I got married, I was excited about it, and the only thing I was afraid of was having to have sex. And it created not only, you know, not only was it difficult to change your mindset so quickly, but it created problems for me, with sex, like some that even have residual effects to this day. Um,
Especially for women or assigned female at birth people, um,
mhm,
it's not about pleasure. It's about like a duty. So it's whatever the man wants as far as like what you're actually doing sexually, as far as like positions or whatever. It's basically you are supposed to submit, and that's just sort of your role in the experience. And in the group that I was in, Homestead Heritage, the marriages were arranged, so I'm just really grateful that my family was able to leave, because there's no telling what, I'm 36 now. I could, if we had stayed in there, I'm just imagining I'd probably have like 7 kids by now. Next one is called Sacred Science. This is a totalist milieu, maintains an aura of sacredness around its base doctrine, and they hold it as sort of a ultimate vision for how humanity should be. Um, so like in Homestead Heritage, it was like everyone who believes or is part of the group is saved. And this is typical with almost every religion. Um, It's when you deprogram, you step outside of religion completely and you look at all these religions and you're like, well, by the logical process of deduction, they cannot all have the answer, right? Um,
Hmm.
like they can't all be right. So that means probably that all of them are wrong. At least that's how I started to logically work through the process of deprogramming and realizing that I was going to be responsible for myself and my worldview, and I had to figure out what I believed. None of these groups were going to be able to tell me what was right for me as far as what was sacred in my own life. Um, so if you question or criticize any of those assumptions within the group, you can't, basically. Um, so he says here that this offers a security to young people because it simplifies the world and answers a contemporary need to combine a sacred set of dogmatic principles with a claim to a science embodying the truth about human behavior and human psychology. So that's another reason why young people are particularly vulnerable to high control groups because when you're younger, you are figuring out what you believe about the world and about humanity. And especially if you have had some kind of traumatic upbringing, which most people have something that they're having to work through, that they went through when they grew up. And they get out of that situation, and then they're looking, and some group purports to have the answer, and so they get drawn into that. And because they're emotionally vulnerable, they fall prey to all of these other psychological tactics because they're young and they don't have the experience. Um, so what would you have to say about that sort of idea of the sacred science and it answering some kind of bigger questions about the world?
Well, for me, I was, taught about, quote, born again Christianity, unquote, like
Hmm.
from the time I was very little. And so, for those who aren't familiar with that, it means praying the sinner's prayer, basically saying that you you acknowledge that you are a sinner, that you were born sinful, and recognize that Jesus died on the cross for your sins, and that you're accepting his free gift of salvation to keep you from going to hell. And so I was 8 when I prayed the sinner's prayer. And so that was something I had already been taught from the time as far back as I can remember by my mom and by the churches she had us at.
Right.
But then once I got to Gateway, I think it was even more drilled in that it wasn't just like those who were not born again Christian, but also like just basically those who were not um, evangelical Christian. And then they also taught you that anything that was not Christian was not just wrong. Other religions were not just wrong, but they were evil and of the devil, and that the devil, Satan, used those to uh, do mind control and to enter your mind through that. So you weren't even supposed to like go to any other religious service. And then it even extended to like not the evil part, but the being wrong part, even extended to churches that were more liturgical, I guess, and that weren't they weren't even necessarily true Christians. Extended to Mormonism, they weren't true Christians, and that was actually seen as evil.
Mm.
But even the liturgical Christian churches just were not. They were not as spiritual, and they weren't necessarily saved from going to hell.
Right. Yes, that sounds very familiar to the sort of worldview that I was brought up with as well. And as a young person, it is very I don't know, seducing to believe that you are one of the ones who's safe because the world does feel scary. Like there's a lot of stuff that's going on and when you have someone who's in a position of authority that's older than you or whatever other things, you feel like and then they're authoritatively saying like, "Well, I've got the answer." Then it's very enticing to a young person to sort of be like, "Well, abdicate my responsibility. I don't have to think about it because this person has it figured out, and all I have to do is this, and this, and then I'll be safe, like from
Hmm.
hellfire or whatever, thing they've come up with to scare people because it's just all scare tactics at the end of the day.
Yeah, and you were supposed to, the goal was to save all the other people from hell. And when
Right.
I was when I was a young adult, when I was part of Gateway, and not yet married, at university, I became part of Campus Crusade for Christ because that was um, uh, an organization that was highly regarded in the church that I was in, because you are trying to convert other students.
Hmm.
And when I think of how much time and energy I put into that instead of my studies, um, because that was more important in my mind and in what the church said than the studies, especially because, if you're at a university that's not a Christian university, you're being taught things that might make you realize, that what you're involved in isn't real.
Mm, right. The whole reason for you even being there, probably in their mind, is just to convert others.
Yep.
And since it's a college, there's probably a lot of young people there, and young people are vulnerable. So in
Yeah.
their mind, it's the perfect place to send people.
Yeah. The university that I was at is huge. So it was just like, constant, like all day, every day when I wasn't in class, either doing a Bible study, like inviting people to a Bible study that I was leading, or with Campus Crusade for Christ, or like actually like having tracks and just stopping students when they're walking in between classes or when they have a spare period or whatever.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um, was there anything else you would like to say about that topic before we
I
go to the
don't think
next
so.
one? Okay.
Yeah, I don't think so.
So we got three more. I know this is going a long time, but um
It's,
so the next one is
I'm on
loading the language. So the language of the totalist environment is characterized by the thought terminating cliche, thought stoppers, repetitiously centered on all-encompassing jargon. The language of non-thought. Words are given new meanings. The outside world does not use the words or phrases in the same way. It becomes a group word or phrase. So this is very similar to milieu control. Um, it's different because it's talking about things that basically make you stop thinking logically.
mm-hmm,
To where because logic is the ultimate deprogrammer, no matter what
mm-hmm.
kind of group you've been in. If you're able to think logically, you can get out of whatever situation you're in. So that's why these
And
groups will
education.
exactly. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm trying to think of an example of like a thought stopper that I remember from my experience within Homestead Heritage. I can't think of like a particular one. Do you have anything?
So I'm not sure if this falls under this category or not, um, but the constant uh, chanting and repetition of Like that we would sing songs and then they would just like stop and repeat the same portion of a chorus, the same line, the same word over and over and over again in a rhythmic sense. And praying in English, praying in tongues, just constant, um, like hypnotic type things because you're supposed to have your eyes closed, have
Right.
your hands raised to God
Mm-hmm.
and in submission. And so it was, and sometimes this would go on for an hour after, the church service would normally be over. Like,
That's a very
like
good
we
point.
didn't have a certain time when the service would finish. And so, yeah, that was huge. The repetition of stuff with your eyes closed and with playing music in the background too, a lot of the time. Even if it wasn't a song, even if it was just praying, they would be playing music softly in the background too.
Mm, that is very interesting because like with meditation, you're sort of training your or in training your brain and body with like certain frequency, um, which is meant to be beneficial. But y people that are controlling others will take that basic sort of scientific fact that your brains operate on different frequencies, like when you're creative mode, I think it's theta waves, and then when you're like the lower frequency when you're asleep, I think is beta. I don't know all the terms, but you're right that when you're doing the chanting or you're whatever, that is a specific frequency that your brain is in training with, and so you're meant to only think that one thing. And when you're doing that,
Mm-hmm.
you're not in that part of your brain that's analytical, that's logical, that's able to
Mm-hmm.
call bullshit, basically. Um, the language of non-thought. Yeah. So basically, anything that makes you
You're just
not be
doing
able to
what they
think.
said. Yeah, you're just like repeating what they tell you to repeat.
Like a
So you're not
sheep.
thinking. Hmm.
Um, so moving on, unless you had something else for that one.
No.
Doctrine over person. So this is where the the theology or whatever it is within the group, the mission of the group or whatever, that is more important than the individual. Um, he says every issue in one's life can be reduced to a single set of principles that have an inner coherence to the point that one can claim the experience of truth and feel it. So taking everything in life and sort of like relating it back to the doctrine of the group. Um, a conflict between what one feels oneself and what the doctrine or ideology says one should experience. So that's where you have an experience, and the group is basically, or the doctrine is, you're feeling, let's say, abused in some way, and the group tells you that you shouldn't feel that way. So then you start feeling guilty for feeling the feelings that are naturally occurring to you because of some experience that you're having. Um, so basically, the group is better or more important than you are individually. Your experience doesn't matter, and yeah, that's extremely debilitating, no matter who you are. So that contradiction. Um, you start to doubt yourself, and
Hmm.
um yeah, that's basically doctrine over person, because if the people were important, then the group would fall apart.
Mm. Yeah, I think like talking about when I left left my husband because he was abusive and they weren't helping me.
Hmm.
Um, and and like I said, like nobody is allowed to contact you except for the pastor to try and coerce you into going back. So and like I said, the public shaming at the next congregational meeting. So whatever happened to you as a person, whatever your reason is for leaving, doesn't matter. It's
Right.
just like, you left the group, you left Christianity, and so, or you left your spouse, regardless of the reason. So yeah, it's not about how you as an individual are being treated. It's just about the doctrine of the group, and this is how it works, and this is why you can't uh, um, reach out to, like, nobody's allowed to reach out to you because it doesn't, you don't matter as
Right.
an individual.
Yeah. Yeah, precisely. And that it's so damaging just from a psychological point of view. So if anybody out there is in this situation right now, I just want to tell you your experience matters. Like you're the only person who is living inside
Mhm.
your body. Nobody else, even though they might try to make it seem like they know what you're going through, they don't. Like you are your own person and you're the only one who can like make this meaning for yourself. And yeah, you're not evil.
and you and it's okay to make your uh own decisions, like independently of your husband, because that's what you're taught in the church that I was in, like, so the husband is a be all and end all, and so it doesn't really matter, what the wife is experiencing. Like I said, she can have an opinion, but the husband's the one who makes the decisions.
Hmm.
So yeah, the even more than the individual not mattering, those who are seen as female are don't matter, or matter very little, even less than those who are seen as male.
Mm. Oof.
And also because, like, the pastors and elders all had to be male.
Yeah, did your group have like because there's this one scripture in the Bible that says something about like that people who are female cannot speak in church. Did your group allow any assigned female at birth people to say anything in church? Like were you allowed to do testimony or not?
Mhm. So we were allowed to do testimony, um but the pastor would be up there, and there were certain people, um and it wasn't just those who were seen as male, like there were some who were seen as female too, who were allowed to just go up and speak because they had surely heard from God. And then there were others who the pastor had to decide whether or not they had actually heard from God, and they would have to run by him first before they could go up and speak. So yeah, women were allowed to go up and speak. They weren't, they kind of, the way they parsed the thing about like preaching or whatever, is like women were allowed to, like on a Sunday during the time that normally there would be the preaching, they were allowed to go up and just kind of like say what God had done in their life or something like that, but they couldn't preach the word.
I
So
see.
that's how they parsed that one. But
Got
yes,
it.
we were allowed to speak up in church, yeah.
Yeah. And children have even less power than adult females in most cases. Um, I'm just I'm curious what your thoughts are because a lot of my a lot of my just personal thoughts about these kind of things are seen through like a sociological lens, and I look at sort of like human evolution and use that to sort of be like, well, I can see why these tendencies exist within humanity because of um how we evolved to do this or that. So, for example, in this particular like where the group is more important than the individual, um, because of when we were evolving in groups that were more like nomadic and living within caves or tents or things like that where the survival was a lot more difficult. Um, like pre-civilization basically. If you were not part of a group, basically your chances of survival were less than if you did have
Hmm.
support of a community. So I wonder if that could be like these cultic groups are sort of like a holdover that we just haven't fully evolved through being able to be in healthy ways. What do you think about that?
I mean, I see what you're saying about the need for groups then, and how, those who were seen as male were the hunters gatherers, and those who were seen as female were staying home and taking care of the home and whatever. So I do see how some of that is carryover, but I think too, like, um there are definitely like a lot of things in Christianity. Like, I can't really speak for other religions because I'm not familiar enough
Hmm.
with them. But where it's where it goes a lot further, because like, in the from what I know anyway, from like the caveman days, um, I don't remember ever hearing that women weren't allowed to have opinions or were worth less than the one seen as male. Like, I don't know if that, like, I think there are a lot of things in Christianity that are specific to religion.
And like not be
Hmm.
educated, like just trapped in this thing that purity culture really is about controlling the um assigned female at birth people portion of the population. And that sort of feminine pleasure is one of the most powerful forces in on the planet, in my opinion. Um, and so I think it's really interesting. I'm reading a book called it's like a long title. It's something about Mary Magdalene. Um, it's channeled by Tom Kenyon. The entire book is channeled by Tom
Okay.
Kenyon. And he's channeling Mary Magdalene, and she's talking about her experience with Jesus and how they were preparing Jesus to go through this lifetime that he sort of like was going through, and how they were doing using sex to sort of like charge their etheric bodies. Um, so it's a very interesting book. I'm not done with it yet, but it's definitely just sort of makes me think in different ways about sexual pleasure. And, she's talking about Kundalini. She doesn't use that word because that's a Hindi word. But she's talking about the serpents at the base of the spine, and that comes up and sort of like fills the channels, and then it does something in your brain, and so that's something that's sort of like a I've heard those terms within several different religions. So whenever
Hmm.
I hear similar things in different traditions, I tend to perk up my ears because I'm like, that could be a universal type of truth.
Hmm.
Um, but basically what she's saying is that um female or feminine pleasure is the basis of everything, like creation and all of that. Like that's the most important thing. So that's really interesting sort of perspective on that.
Hmm.
And so going back to the purity thing, yeah, that I think sexuality is one of the biggest parts of that purity culture because
Hmm.
it's such a basic human like I don't know. It's one of the most powerful things out there. You know, like you hear sex sells. Sex appeal is like this
Hmm.
really huge part of just who we are as people psychologically. Um, and that's how we're created. It's how we come into like being at this point. And so these people that seek to control others, they know that sexuality is like really powerful, and the feelings that come around sexuality when it's when you're made to feel shame and guilt about that, like those are the sort of like the strongest ways to control human beings.
Hmm. So for me, like I didn't have my first orgasm until after I had left my husband. I never had during our marriage ever. And and then something else that I was gonna say, what was the last thing that you just said about? Sorry, I was
Basically, like how sexuality is such a big part of who we are that it's one of the most
mm,
effective forms of control. That and so
okay. Yeah, I don't remember exactly what else I was gonna say, but I do know that it was also, oh yeah, I remember now. Okay, so I told you how I was afraid of sex before getting married. Well, when we were doing marriage counseling, and part of it was like with the pastor, and part of it was like the wife would be with the pastor's wife, and the husband would be with the pastor for part of it. And I remember telling the pastor's wife how scared I was of it. And she said, well, here's what I do. I just think of ice cream and think of eating ice cream when I'm like, so she basically had to dissociate. And this is what she was telling me to do to
mm,
be able to go through with it. Yeah.
wow, that's
Yeah.
crazy. And didn't you say something like sort of along these lines like gosh, I'm trying to remember what it was exactly. We were talking about either the pastor or the pastor's wife told you whenever you went to them, like telling them that the domestic abuse was occurring, that you should just sleep in the other room.
So that was actually a Christian counselor. It wasn't somebody in that church.
Okay.
Um, it was, yes, I went to a Christian counselor before I left my husband, and she said that because more of the abuse happened at night, that I should, and especially in bed, that I should just sleep in another room. We only had a one bedroom apartment, but regardless, like that was what she counseled me to do instead of leaving.
That is wild. Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
But
yeah, like the mo like think about the craziest lengths that you could go to stay within this like, well, at least I'm pure, you know. Mm.
yeah, and like to do with the purity culture too, like you weren't even supposed to have sinful thoughts. Like you weren't supposed to think of anybody other than your spouse in any sexual way. And they had like they strongly encourage you to be part of an accountability group. And so the accountability groups, you would you would be confessing your so-called sins, including your sinful thoughts, and just bearing your soul to these people. And of course, like the groups were only like assigned male at birth in one group, assigned female at birth in another group,
Mhm.
because you weren't allowed to have crossover like that. So yeah, that was part of purity too, was the accountability groups.
Absolutely. And that's actually the next thing, the bullet underneath the demand for purity in Lifton's criteria here. He says, ties in with the process of confession. One must confess when one is not conforming. So yeah, which also ties back
Hmm.
to the first milieu control, which is an attempt to manage an individual's inner communication.
Hmm.
Um, Whew. So, yeah, I think a big part of deprogramming from that purity culture, for me, is just doing things that I would have been ashamed for before, and then just realizing that that's okay and that I don't have to feel ashamed for
Hmm.
doing those things.
Hmm. Yeah. And, they told you how awful it was going to be, and you would, feel like trash and everything. And it's all just fear tactics
Yeah.
and control.
Was there anything else you'd like to say about that demand for purity as a criteria for a high control group?
Um, well, I'm not sure if this falls into the purity category or not, but like um if wives stayed at home if they were stay-at-home moms, and especially if they homeschooled their kids, then they were seen as uh far above and more spiritual. So I don't know that it's more pure, but definitely more spiritual and more highly regarded. And you were supposed to have lots of kids too. So like they would be the the ones who were seen as the most spiritual would be homeschooling lots of kids. So I think I don't know that it falls into purity culture, but it just falls into the control of the very gendered roles, the binary
Hmm.
gendered roles.
Yeah, I think it definitely does. And I think that's something across a lot of these evangelical groups is
Hmm.
make a lot of kids. That I mean that's how it was in the one that I was in. I have seven siblings. I think my parents were really trying to be seen as like good people or, pure, the
Hmm.
ones that are really with it or whatever, and
Hmm.
so that's probably why they had that many kids because, and I think this also ties into another one that we'll talk about later, sort of like financial control, because
Hmm.
in order to do that, if you have two parents in a home and one of them's working and the other one's
Hmm.
not, that really puts a lot of
Hmm.
pressure on the one that's working to really support everyone. The other
Hmm.
point is that kids are expensive.
Hmm.
So you have to basically be a lawyer or a doctor or own your own business. You have to be making enough money to do this and support all these people
Or be
and
pastor of a mega church.
or be pastor of a mega church,
Yeah.
which is a lot of money laundering that goes on with those. I'm pretty sure. Weird stuff. Like I think there I saw a story about Osteen finding a bunch of finding a bunch of money behind a toilet.
Yes, yes. I
Like, what
remember
is
that.
that?
I remember that, yes.
Like, that didn't things that didn't happen for $1,000, Alex.
Prosperity gospel.
Like,
That's what it's called, the prosperity gospel. Like you're gonna be blessed financially, and that was just one of the ways that he was blessed, through the prosperity gospel.
right, which means that he was pure enough to be blessed or whatever, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Crazy stuff.
Hmm.
But I wonder, like, where is that money actually coming from? Who knows? Probably the congregation.
Hmm.
Um, but not to get out of order. Where are we at? Confession is the next one. So he says cultic confession is carried beyond its ordinary religious, legal, and therapeutic expressions to the point of becoming a cult in itself. Sessions in which one confesses one's sins are accompanied by patterns of criticism and self-criticism, generally transpiring within small groups with an active and dynamic thrust toward personal change. A symbolic self-surrender makes it virtually impossible to attain a reasonable balance between worth and humility. So a certain amount of, realizing, oh, hey, I fucked up here, I should probably change this, is healthy for psychological actualization. I mean, that's how people learn and grow. It's like, well, I did this thing and maybe you shouldn't do that next time. And talking with your friends or family about that. So that's, I mean, that's a normal, healthy part of human expression. But what this is talking about is where it becomes unhealthy and you start to question whether or not you are even a good person anymore. And if you're
Hmm.
starting to do that, that's not healthy. Um,
Hmm.
what are your thoughts on that?
So, well, I mentioned the accountability groups before, but when
Yes.
you say small groups, like we had small groups, they were called home groups that um, were, from what I recall, it was maybe like 12-ish people, and you would
Hmm.
meet in people's homes partway through the week, and you had the same group, and so there was also, aside from accountability groups, like you were supposed to be accountable to people in your home group as well, and something else that like brings to mind, I'm not sure if it's exactly the same thing, but how um you were supposed to give your testimony. You were supposed to go up front and give your testimony. So I guess that's not like confessing your sins, but it's supposed to be like, hey, this is what I did for God, and this is how God worked through me. And so you're also supposed to conform to that and speak that in front of the entire congregation. But in terms of the unworthiness, like constantly being told that you're unworthy of God's love and forgiveness, yet He is so um, gracious to extend that to you, that gift to you that you are so undeserving of. And so everything is always like unworthy, undeserving. You're supposed to humble yourself before God, like lay prostrate on the floor.
Mm.
Um, just, yeah. So,
Yeah, that's kind of whether you're making yourself feel guilty in front of the group or you're saying that you did something within front of the group, those are definitely related. I feel like
mhm,
I know that being a part of those situations in a group setting of abuse is what I would call it, emotional abuse. I felt when other people would go and testify, it would actually make me, this is how mind fucked I was. It would actually make me feel guilty about myself for not having something that great to say as well. So this is
mhm,
just one of the layers of
mhm,
like bullshit that is a
mhm.
result of this kind of thing. Um, yeah.
Yeah, so a thing too is like if your job was in the secular world, you were supposed to be ministering to your coworkers and like whoever else you came into contact with. And so that would be part of your testimony, is how that week you had what you had done to minister to these people and how God worked through them. And then like, sometimes people would just be humoring you to get you to shut up. And
Mm,
but here you thought this was actually God was softening their heart.
hmm.
And yes, they
Heard
always
that.
talked about softening of your heart and being malleable, because God is supposed to form you exactly how he wants.
Yep,
And
that's all
God was always
familiar.
a he. Hmm.
Um, Was there anything else you wanted to say about that before we go to sacred science? Seems to have spouted or like sprouted from Puritanism in like England or Europe and then
Hmm.
spread from there.
Through colonization.
So I don't know if that thing, yeah. So I don't know if that like particular dynamic is something that is something that's inherent within our psychology as humans, but I feel like the group thing and like having or feeling like like you're gonna die if you don't belong to a group in some way is like this really basic like psychological thing that's like really hard to get away from. Maybe
Well,
impossible.
and something that I was just thinking about in terms of colonization is from what I know of indigenous groups in North America, I think that before colonization, like I think those assigned female at birth were the same worth of those who are assigned male at birth, and also they are uh, they also have like two spirit people, like they were
Hmm.
already gender diverse, you know, before before it became more well known about
Hmm.
gender diversity. And so, I think a lot of that was Christianity and colonization, because even like the indigenous people, they lived in groups. But I think
Yes.
everybody, from what I understand, there wasn't the gender binary division of who was worth more. So yeah, I think there
Yeah.
was a lot pertaining to religion and Christianity in particular.
Yeah. It does seem to be that way. So number 8 is dispensing of existence. Since the group has an absolute or totalist vision of truth, those who are not in the group are bound up in evil, are not enlightened, are not saved, and do not have the right to exist. So, being versus nothingness, impediments to legitimate being must be pushed away or destroyed. One outside the group may always receive their right of existence by joining the group. Uh, so this is what you see in groups like the Amish who practice shunning. And Homestead Heritage did also practice shunning, and I know that you said that Gateway also practiced shunning where you weren't supposed to talk to people if they weren't part of the group unless you were trying to entice them to come back. Um, so
Mhm.
that's what this is. This is basically if you aren't following, if you're not getting in line, if you're not doing the thing, then basically you don't exist to us. So that kind of negates one's personhood if they are not part of the group and is a way to ensure control. And that the certain ways of being do not change and that the group can maintain its control. Um, Are there any other thoughts that you have regarding this dispensing of existence type of thing where people become not people anymore once they stop um, doing the right stuff?
So I don't know that Gateway ever said that people weren't, or implied that people weren't people. It's just that we weren't supposed to associate with them because you could be corrupted by
Mm-hmm.
them. So it was not that they didn't exist. It's just
Mm-hmm.
that you didn't want to be corrupted of them and by them, and the whole thing about being um, in the world but not of the world, and not supposed to have friends who aren't Christian. And um, so yeah, I think like with the group I was in, it wasn't about non-existence of those people. It was
Mm-hmm.
just like they're gonna corrupt you. If you are not able to convert them, they're gonna corrupt you.
Right. So those who are not either that have been in the group and then left or have never joined the group are not as good as the ones that are in the group. Um, that sort of idea. Um, he says those that are
Hmm.
not in the group are bound up in evil, not enlightened, whatever.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
yeah, that's a method that these groups use to maintain their control because if they, for example, at Gateway, if they let people that had left continue to associate with the people who were in the group, then they might, like you said earlier, start seeing that something's not right here.
well, and that there is life outside the group and that life can be good outside the group.
Better even. Maybe a
Exactly.
lot better.
Yeah. Yes, and they didn't want you seeing that. Or even like I remember that before I left my husband, that there was a lady who was probably in her 40s and I was in my 20s who I talked with a lot after church services and stuff, and I really liked her. She left her husband, and based on some things that I had observed, I was pretty sure she had left because of domestic violence. Well, I had asked the pastor if he could give me her number, her new number, because I wanted to reach out to her. And he was very adamant that he was not going to give me her number because he did not want her corrupting me. So I think, because he knew about the domestic violence in my marriage, even more so,
Mm,
um, he
wow.
did not want me talking to her at all.
Wow.
That's
That is a great example of this last criteria here because um yeah, it's not like he was able to make her not exist, but he was able to withdraw that channel from you to even be able to contact her. Um
Mhm.
which to any logical, like psychologically actualized human being, that's, I mean, hate to use one of their terms, but that's evil.
It, yeah, yeah, it is.
You know, that's fucked up.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, thanks for going over all these criteria with me. I think there's no doubt in mine or yours or anyone who has listened to this that group that you're in is definitely a high control group. It checks all of these boxes and probably more that we didn't even talk about. So, yeah, I really I really hope that this will reach people who are in that group that you were in or the group that I was in or other groups that are similar because they all usually all use these same things. And uh is there anything else that you would like to say maybe to people who are in situations like you were in or who are out now and are deprogramming? Um Any thoughts that you'd like to leave with them?
Um, can I just can I just bring up something that we didn't cover first that I think is a very important part that would have fallen under one of the categories, but I'm not sure which one, is
Absolutely.
financial control. Financial
Mm,
control. And this church, the pastors and their adult children would live in these extravagant houses, and yet they would constantly be asking the congregation to give above and beyond just their 10% tithes. And about once a month, they would have, uh, instead of just like handing around an offering plate or whatever, they would have you come up front and put your money in. And so everybody would see who was going up and who wasn't.
mm,
And so, yeah, there was that, that control too, trying to shame you into giving more than even the 10% that you were supposed to give. And even like, I remember surviving on cornmeal for a while because I didn't have money yet, I was still given my 10% because God was going to bless you if you gave you 10%. And so financial control was a huge thing and a huge part, I think, of high control groups in general. But like I said, like the pastors, they're living high on the hog and they're adult children. And there was one other thing too that I was just gonna like, just as an example of how the pastors controlled their own minor children. Um, is I was at the main pastor's house for the premarital counseling, and he had four daughters. And there was one who was like maybe about 9 years old. And she was heavier than her three sisters. She wasn't fat, but she was heavier than her three sisters. And the pastor was explaining to me how hard it was to explain to this one daughter why she couldn't have seconds when all her sisters could have seconds, and why she had to eat less than all the rest of them. And I'm thinking, like, she's like 9 years old. Can you imagine, like, the eating disorders that I'm sure she had as a
Mm-hmm.
teenager, or probably even a preteen, because of that? And just like, just that control, and that amount of fucking up your kids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
So,
is, yeah, thanks for bringing up the financial thing because, that is one of the main ways besides like sexual shame. I think financial is probably the
hmm
next biggest, or maybe they're about the same, but those are like kind of the two biggest ones. And,
hmm
yeah, I remember being, I don't remember ever going hungry really, but, between having so many siblings, there was like, and my mom not
hmm
working, there was like nothing to go
hmm
around. Like I remember having
hmm
at most like two articles of clothing I could wear at any point. Um, so and we gave our 10% and
hmm
you know, that was just how it was. So
hmm
that's a big way that,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. um so for those who, like, going back to your question about anything else that I have to say, like, for those who are in Gateway or in similar groups, especially evangelical Christianity groups, because that's what I'm familiar with, like, life is good on the other side of it. Like, there's what they're teaching you about how your life is just going to suck, and how you're going to always be lonely. And even if things seem fun, they're only going to be for a short time or whatever. It's all just control, because my life, I cannot even begin to tell you how much better it got. One, once I got out of evangelical Christianity, but then in addition, I mean, primarily once I got out of evangelical Christianity, but even once I got out of Christianity full stop, um, my life has gotten so much better. And you find out who you are as a
Mm,
person. And going through the deconstruction process, and just realizing some of the things that I was taught from when I was little, like, even not even just a gateway, but just like stuff that's in the Bible, and like how messed up some of it is, like, like promoting rape and genocide. And it's just, it's like, how could I have believed that? But you know what, like, it doesn't mean that you're stupid. It just, like, this is what they do. This is how they control. And even very, very intelligent people can fall prey to this mind control. It's a very powerful thing, and it doesn't have to do with your intelligence.
that's a really excellent point. Um, yeah, because people need, even really intelligent people who are lonely are
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable because we all at
Mm-hmm.
some point feel this need like we have to be part of a group.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there are groups out there that are healthy, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if you just sort of take it easy and don't get super close or like I don't know, like it's hard to warn away from these kind of things because they're so they usually start super slowly. Um
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe if you're getting to know a group and maybe your life starts feeling like more depressing or you like feel guilty all the time, that could be like a red flag to be like, "Oh, hold on, like maybe this isn't a good situation."
Mm-hmm. And they're telling you what to believe. You know,
Yeah,
like their beliefs are the only correct beliefs.
right. That is a huge red flag because there are so many wonderful religions and cultures and traditions all over the world, and each one has truth to it. So if
Hmm.
anyone's saying they have the only way, then you pretty much can know that they don't.
Hmm. Agreed.
Um, um, hmm. Well, I've really, really enjoyed our conversation and the different paths that we went down and just enjoyed connecting with you and want to thank you for being vulnerable and coming on to here and sharing your experience because a lot of people who have been in these situations, even once they get out, find it really difficult to talk about it because of a lot of factors. Um, so once again, I just want to thank you for being brave and sharing your story. You're welcome to come back at any time and talk more about it. Yeah, I'll just let you get the last word.
Well, again, I just want to thank you for doing this podcast, which is so important to help people and reach out to people who are like, if they're listening to your podcast, they're probably either they've left the group or they're thinking of leaving the group. And so it's just so important to hear from people who have made it through to the other side. And like when you were talking about how some people don't want to share even after they've left, like I know even even sometimes with people I know, like I don't want to who weren't part of those groups, I can feel sometimes I still feel stupid for falling for all of that. Um, but you know, like I said, it's not a sign of your intelligence. And yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation as well. And I think, you know, I've learned stuff from you for sure, but even more stuff about the group that I was of Gateway, like things that even in the 7 years that I've been deconstructing haven't haven't even come up until now. So yeah, it was very enlightening in more than one way. So yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.